What is up, everybody? Welcome to Pentesting for Noobs episode 2. Now you might be saying, wait a second, where was episode 1? Well, episode 1 was the pilot episode, and the pilot episode gives us a trial run to see if there are things we like or don't like. Now, the feedback was actually overwhelmingly positive, and the video title was Pentesting for Dummies. Well, the for dummies is trademarked. We can't use that. If we continue with this, we'll get into some trouble. So I put a little poll out on Twitter, came back. Most of you said, hey, why don't you just call it Pentesting for Noobs? Perfect. So I wanted to share you guys, I'm an open book. I wanted to share with you how the video did. I asked for feedback, and I would say that it was overwhelmingly positive. Like 9.4 thousand views, 64,000 minutes of watch time. If you look at where we started in the beginning to where we actually are, this is average here, this gray bar, the blue bar is where we're at. That's doing really, really well. So the likes versus dislikes is doing very well. Also, you guys are phenomenal. You liked it. And we're at 69 hours in the first release. Nice. So what we're going to do today is do episode 2, and we're going to keep this series going since the pilot did so well. I just wanted to throw it out there that we are doing a little rename. We're going to call this For Noobs instead of For Dummies. So with that being said, I have gone ahead and spun up a machine. So go ahead and get logged into your Hack the Box website, into your account. Now, if you did not watch episode 1, then you are behind. And again, we're not going to repeat ourselves too much along the episode. So what we learned last time, we covered enumeration and legacy. This time we're going to look at this box called lame. Now lame is a Linux machine, as you see by the little penguin here next to it, and it's pretty easy on the difficulty side. We're going to take a look at that. It seems a little bit maybe more difficult rated than legacy was, but no need to worry. We're going to walk through everything here. So this will be episode 2, box 2. I've gone ahead and hit the little start button on the machine. Yours should have spun up with my stalling now. And I'm going to go ahead and get this scanning. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up a new window. I'm going to make it nice and big for you guys. And this is 10.10.10.3. So let's go ahead and just do our nmap that we showed last time. And we'll do 10.10.10.3 like this. We're going to let this scan. This could take anywhere up to 5 minutes. So in my stalling time, what I'm going to do is describe some different scanning methods. So last time I told you about how this is my methodology. If I want to scan a network, if I want to scan a machine, I'm going with this, and that is 100% true. But there are other methodologies that are out there, and maybe you find something that you like better. We kind of talked about that last time. One that I want to present to you and that I talk about quite a bit on my streams is the idea of scanning. There's 2 different ideas here. One is doing a quick scan. So we just say nmap and we just say 10.10.10.3. We get rid of all this. We could leave the speed in there T4 if we want. But we get rid of all this stuff here and we just scan this. Now what is that going to do? Well, if you remember from last time, that's going to only scan the top 1,000 ports because we're not scanning all 65,535 here. So we're only going to scan top 1,000. Well, we can scan the top 1,000 quickly and see what comes back. And in that theory, we can then go poke and prod around some things that might be there. It's generally pretty fast. So that's one theory. I don't like doing that too much. Some people like to go that way. Another theory or methodology to do that I'm not opposed to, honestly, is to nmap all open ports, speed of T4, whatever speed you like, and take out this -A. Now this -A is the speed killer. This is what takes the longest, is we're doing all those different enumerations against this machine, right? We're doing the OS enumeration, the service version enumeration, trace route, etc. What we saw last time in the help menu, we're doing all that stuff against all the ports on this machine. Now, maybe a wiser strategy and a faster strategy could be to take this out completely, quickly scan with nmap for open ports on this machine, all 65,000, right? scan for open ports, and then see what ports return. Now we could take that, let's just copy this, and let's go into a new tab and our scan results back. So I installed successfully. So we could take this and let's say something like port 21 was open and port 80 was open and 443 was open, right? Say you had something like this come back and there's only 3 ports open. Why not just scan for 3 ports? Scan everything for 3 ports. You could be wasting a lot of time here just scanning with the -A. Now in a later video, I'll probably show you some other techniques revolving around this. One that I've been introduced to recently and I'm kind of maybe transitioning to, I don't like to admit that I'm transitioning off nmap ever, but is another tool called mass scan. Now mass scan is incredibly fast for finding these ports for this purpose here, and then we can go back and just scan all against the ports that we find. Now, if that's the way you want to go, we'll do it in one video just to show you guys. You guys can make up your own minds on whether or not you like to go that route. Now you can see this took 144 seconds. That's really not that bad. If you're doing some kind of like first blood race or you're trying to, get first in something for more points for whatever it is, and like a capture the flag, then maybe, this method is the better method. You script it out and do whatever. But if you're doing a pen test or whatever, you're going to be waiting on lots of stuff anyway. So in my opinion, there's no point in building up those few extra seconds. So it's really up to you and how you want to do it. Okay, our scan is back. So we have a few things here. Let's talk first. Port 21 is open. Port 21 is FTP, the file transfer protocol. So we can see a few things from this. We see a version here. Perfect. We can Google that later. We see anonymous login is allowed. Nice. Okay, so this in itself, if we're doing a pen test, may be a finding, right? Why is anonymous login allowed? Why should anybody be able to access a server and put files on and take files off? Especially if this is a public facing server. If it's internal, okay, a little bit more leniency. But on the external side, why? Why? So we've got that. We can see that they connected and that's about it. Okay, so we've got 21. Now 21 by itself is not exploitable in the fact that you can put files and get files off of it. Now versions might be exploitable. A very common one that I know of is the Konica Minolta FTP has a buffer overflow. So something like a buffer overflow attack against a service version, perfect, right? That might be exploitable. But by nature, typically, if we're looking at port 21 and there's no version exploit, it's not really a vulnerability per se. It's a vulnerability if you change some things like anonymous FTP login. Okay, we were logged in, now we can put some files on the server. But the second part of that is how do we execute the files on the server? Now we're not going to see that today because there is going to be no way to execute these. But think about that. If I put a file on the server, I need to either be able to execute it myself or I need to get somebody to execute it for me. So I have to do some sort of social engineering, trick somebody into opening a file, or if the file is maybe on a web server, I can go in and I can open it myself and exploit it. I have to have some kind of command execution, right, in order to do that. So putting a file onto a server, not malicious enough. We need a second part of that typically, unless there's some sort of version exploit. Okay, so downward, we've got port 22 open. Port 22 is SSH. So SSH, in my opinion, is not what we're looking for when we're trying to run exploits. Now, SSH can be exploitable. I, in the wild, and really in even CTFs, have never seen a version exploit for SSH. So with that being said, some options that we have are brute force attacks or gathering credentials and trying to log in that way, right? Now, when I'm doing a pen test, of course, I'll check and see if there's any sort of vulnerability here. There are vulnerabilities with SSH. I'm just saying I've never encountered them personally. I have seen them. So the SSH thing, if I'm doing a pen test, And you can consider this maybe last resort, or, you're going to brute force it anyway. You're going to say, I'll send an attack at root with like 500 or 1,000 bad passwords. And there's reasoning behind this. One, if I log in with a bad password or top 1,000 password, why did that happen? How bad is your password policy, right? Two, if I got 1,000 temps underway and nothing blocked me, no alerts were given to the client, then there's an issue with the SIM, right? What's wrong with their alerting? Why are they not catching this? Do they have some sort of detection? If they do, why is it not seeing brute force attacks? So I like to hammer away. I am a very, very loud, very intentionally noisy pen tester. Now that is completely different from the red team side where you're trying to be as quiet as possible. In my belief as a pen tester, if I am loud and you catch me, great, I'll start getting quieter and quieter. But if I'm being loud and you're not catching me, this helps me identify your weakest spots, which is your SIM, which helps with the detection. So I will bang on the SSH door if I have to. Okay, so another thing that should be pointed out here is a lot of times in these CTF machines, and I consider Hack the Box CTF, is when you see SSH like this, you're going to gather credentials likely from some other aspect, some other exploit, some place you're going to find them, stumble upon them, and then you're going to use SSH to log in and get your lower shell. That happens quite frequently. In fact, a lot of the boxes that we're going to encounter are something like port 22 open and port 80 open, and that's all you got. So you have to probably exploit port 80 to get into port 22 because port 80 is way more higher chance of being exploitable than 22 is. Okay, so going down the list, we have got 139 and 445. Now these relate to Samba. We talked about this last time, right? SMB, file shares, known vulnerabilities all across the board. So many bad things with SMB. Oh my God, SMB is the worst, right? So we need to look into this Samba SMBD 3.0.20 version and see if there's any kind of exploit for it. And then lastly, this 3632, I actually don't know what disccd is. I know somebody's going to comment and tell me what it is because that happens all the time. So please do comment and tell me what this is. I have no freaking idea. But the pen testing methodology behind this is to Google what this version 1 is. And this may be 4.24 and is if there is an exploit behind this, right? So we won't look into it because that's not the path of the machine. But if we were blind in this situation, we would absolutely look into this. Okay, so we come down. It gives us some OS best guesses, and it guesses White Russian 0.9. That is my favorite alcoholic beverage, but I don't think that's a Linux version. We're seeing here that it is Ubuntu, and its guess is coming through as White Russian. So as I told you last time, the OS guesses are not always accurate, and here we can see that. So we come down to the bottom, we can see some information around the actual SMB results, the OS discovery. It is running Unix, Samba 3.0.20-Debian. Okay, workgroup, blah, blah, blah. Perfect. So we see that SMB is open. So if we go through the steps as a refresher first time, let's go ahead. Let's start with SMB. SMB is fresh in our mind. We covered it in the previous episode. So we're going to stay with SMB first. So what we're going to do is first things first, we're going to check with SMB client. Do we have any kind of login, right? SMB client -L just to list the folders. And I'm going to say 10.10.10. I believe this was 3. Try to list it, enter a password. Okay, we can list a folder here. What? That's awesome, right? So we can list some folders. And it looks like they're probably trolling us. Oh no's here on the temp folder. So we've got the print, IPC, admin. Really, ideally, we're after like this folder, but we can enumerate here and see if there's anything. So one thing I can do is I can just delete this and we can try to connect to the temp folder with anonymous. And then we say ls. And okay, there's nothing really here, right? There's these files, but we can grab this file. Like there's no byte size on it. This JSVC up. There's nothing here in this temp folder. Now we can put something into the temp folder, and this is the same kind of idea as FTP, but how are we going to execute it? When we get to SMB and we get into these file shares, we're after enumeration. On top of that, as you'll find out at a later time, is if we get credentials and we have admin credentials to access this admin group, we're after an admin shell. We can get a shell with something like psexec and own this machine very fast if we've got the right credentials. So we can run through these and see where we have access to. Now, this would be a finding on a pen test again, right? Like why default credentials, why anonymous login or whatever into this SMB? It shouldn't happen. So we could say exit, and then we can try to navigate into the opt folder and see if it'll let us. And now you're seeing access denied. So opt to be a more juicy folder to get some information on maybe what kind of programs they got installed. But obviously we're not getting there. Now we can check the admin folder, spray and pray here, and you can see access denied as well. So we would need root's password to really get into this. And we're at a little bit of a dead end here. So that's fine. The other thing that we talked about last time was that we could use Metasploit to gather information, SMB version, about this exploit or about this this version. But you see here, last time the version wasn't provided for us, but this time the version of Samba or SMB was provided for us. So this is really nice. And we can just copy this. We could take this over to Google and we can ask Google some stuff, right? We could say, hey, Google, look, it starts to know you and it starts to know things about certain, like this Samba. It probably knows we're looking for an exploit, but more and more that I Google stuff, it starts coming up exploit for everything. And you can see I've been in here before. So again, from last time, we've got options, right? The first thing that comes up is Rapid7. Love Rapid7. Why again? Because they make Metasploit. This is properly a Metasploit module here. Perfect. We also have this here. 3.0.20 Debian exploit through 3.0.25 username map script. That looks like it fits what we need, right? So we can come into here and, oh, this is just the Metasploit Ruby module anyway. Okay, so I thought maybe we'd have a manual exploit here. We don't. There might be one out there for this, but what we're looking at is a Ruby module for Metasploit. That just means it's already built in anyway, 99% of the time. So if we come in here and we review the exploit, it says this module exploits command execution vulnerability in Samba versions 3.0.20 through 3.0.25. Check, we meet that when using the non-default username map script configuration option. By specifying a username containing shell meta characters, attackers can execute arbitrary commands. When no authentication is needed. This is perfect. Okay, so I think this is money. We could try it, give it a go, see what it looks like. So let's copy this. And let's go ahead and open up Metasploit. We could say MSF console. Now it'll take a second to boot. If you wanted to boot faster and you're newer, you can do something like service PostgreSQL start, or what is it? System CTL PostgreSQL enable, or enable PostgreSQL. And that'll have the Postgres database running, which is what Metasploit runs off of. Every time your computer starts. I just don't mind the little 5-second wait or whatever that goes on in the beginning. So, okay. So anyway, we can say now, we can just paste this, right? I think we copied it. So let's try to paste it. Boom. Say options. Okay, we got to set our R host. Remember, our R host is the remote host. That is our victim. That is who we are attacking. It's 10.10.10.3. We always show targets just to be safe. Only one target, and that is automatic. So let's run this bad boy and see what happens. Boom, we just popped a shell. Okay, so last time we popped a shell and we were in Meterpreter in Windows. This time we are in a Linux machine. We could say, who am I? Okay, we are root, host name. print the working directory or present working directory. Okay, and then we can cd into, or we can do ls, see all the options, right? I could cd into home, ls. So, you know, there's a lot of options here. Cd ... we could cd into root, and we can grab the root.txt. If it has locate available, you could just say locate root.txt. Whether or not that comes back with anything, it doesn't. If it has update db, and then we could try locate root.txt. That works. Could also locate user.txt. And you can see that the other user is this Makis, I don't know. But if you want to grab your flags, here are your flags. Okay, so a couple other things. We talked last time about the enumeration that we want to do in post exploitation. Right now we are root. So root means that we have full access to this machine. We own this machine. Right now, up until this point, it has been easy. There has been no privilege escalation, and that's a-okay in our books. We are dummies. We are noobs. We are going to build up into that, okay? So for now, take these easy wins and enjoy them. So as root and as post enumeration, some things that we can look at. We can take, for example, the Etsy file, Etsy shadow file, and Etsy password. So let's cat out the Etsy password. Now, you may have access to this and should have access to this as most users. So if we were to have a lower level shell, you could have access to this file. Now what this is the password file is misleading. There are no passwords in this file. You see this nice little X here. Now back in the day, they used to put passwords in the password file, but they stopped doing that. Instead, they created what is called a shadow file as well. The shadow file will take the password and it will put it, or the password hash, and it'll put it in this X placeholder here. So I'll show you that in a second. But what we can do is we can print this out. This shows you some information. Root's always at the top. And then you start coming down to the bottom. Your users, your real users, are down at the bottom. The rest of these are service accounts. And I've seen that 99% of the time where it's like this. So you'll always see our users at the bottom. We only have this one user, that is this Makis user, or Makis, or however you pronounce it. So the other thing that we can do is we could say cat Etsy shadow. And this will give you a good idea too as to what accounts have passwords. And you can see there are a few accounts here with passwords. So now this password, this hash here, this hash will go in where the X is. Okay, so the root has that X, this hash will go in there, and that combines the whole file in order to be in one. This is called unshadowed. When it's unshadowed like this, it's combined into one long format. Now there is a tool that we can get into. If we go into, let's go into a new tab here. So it is called unshadowed. Unshadow. So let's do something first. Let's go ahead and copy here. Let's copy the Etsy password file. We'll say cat Etsy, actually gedit, sorry, password. I've got an old one in here. Perfect. I'll save this, and then we'll just copy this other one, and I'll show you what an unshadow looks like. Copy this guy here, the shadow, and we're going to gedit the shadow. And then we could save that one. And then we can just say unshadow. And when we run unshadow without anything, it's going to ask us, say, hey, we want your password file and we want your shadow file. So all you got to do is unshadow password shadow, run that, and look what it does for you. It prints out a nice unshadowed file. See, the X now has been replaced with this hash. Now, why is this important? Why the heck do we care? Well, we can take this and we can try to crack these passwords in Hashcat. Okay, so you can tell your hash. This is an MD5, I believe. Don't quote me, I'm pretty sure. MD5 is $1. So the $, blank $, is a good way to tell your hash. Some are 5, some are 6. And that's a quick way to say, hey, Google, what's $1 in a hash format? I'm 90% sure it's MD5. So you can run this through Hashcat. Unfortunately, I'm actually using my Hashcat right now to work on an assessment, so I can't show you this, but I have made videos on cracking Hashcat. If we come back into, let's see, my videos, and we scroll through all of these, there is a Hashcat video in here somewhere. So if you look through my videos, it is this one here, cracking Linux password hashes. I will link this down in the description below if you're curious. Very similar process. You just run Hashcat against this. I explain it in more detail here. So if you want to know and you have a little bit more research, there you go. Okay, so we talked about post exploitation. We're going to gather the first thing I'm after, right, is gathering these hashes. I'm going to crack these hashes or try to crack these hashes and see where I can go from there. From that point, you know, I also want to gather networking information. We talked about that last time. What's the IF config? What is what's the ARP? What's the routing table, etc. If you don't know what the heck I'm talking about when it comes to networking, you should probably look into learning a little bit more networking before you get too far into pen testing. Having a good networking background goes a long way. You don't have to have a detailed networking background, just understand the basics. So I'll look at those kinds of things, you know, and see what the connections are, netstat as well, just to see what kind of the connections are. But, you know, I'm mainly after this. I'll look through user files, see if there's anything interesting and how we can access or leverage what we gain from this machine. How can we take this machine and use it to get other places, right? That's all post-exploitation is. What information can we gather again? So enumeration is always key. Enumeration prior to exploitation, enumeration if you have a lower level user to try to get that higher level user, and then enumeration once you have owned the machine completely to move further. You're always looking for the next step, and the more information you can gather, the better off you are. Now, we won't talk about it for a very long time, but if you're saying, hey, what about the other machines that we were supposed to exploit or the other services that we're supposed to exploit? Okay, there's one other service here. Well, there's three really, right? If we were to have done this box, if I were to have done this blind, I would have enumerated this version as well. And let's take a look at it. So we can go out to Google and just go paste. And look, Rapid7 has one too. Rapid7 has a backdoor code execution on this. Now it says it's introduced for this between blah, blah, blah. It just gives us and says that, you know, this exploit belongs to this version. So we could come in and we could use this, try to exploit it, etc. Now the owner of the box put this on here as a rabbit hole. So if you tried this, if you've done this before, if you've looked at this box and you tried this, that's perfectly okay. I would have fallen down this rabbit hole as well. In fact, I'm sure I did when I attempted the box a long time ago. But once you get past the, hey, I've attempted this however many times and it's not working, time to move on, right? Don't get stuck down the rabbit holes. A lot of boxes you're going to find have them. Don't waste too much time. That's really the lesson. The appropriate thing is to do your research, as you just saw. Another thing that we should do too, and I did not show you, is we should FTP to the machine, right? What's in that file folder? If we can just type in anonymous here, and I just always type anonymous for the password, we could say ls and say, okay, what's here? Well, there's nothing here. Okay. So, and we're in the base directory, so there's literally nothing. Now, again, we could put a file in here. How are we going to access the file? And that's the issue. If this was like a web server or something that we could go and access the file once we've uploaded it, then we could start talking about how we can get malicious. But in this sense, we can upload the file, but unless we can get somebody to go open the file, there's nothing that we can do right now. So this is why we didn't spend a lot of time here, but do know that when you get FTP, you've got to have a second form of getting that file to exploit. You can be malicious, but you have to have somebody to exploit it for you or a way to exploit it. And if you're looking for the version or you see a version, that's going to be your exploit. This is going to get you a reverse shell before a file upload will, most likely. You need 2 chains here, 2 chains. You need at least 2 chains of attack here, and then you need, 1 potentially here. So we search for this exploit. It's not valid on this machine, but this is the right methodology, and that's really what we're after. Same thing here. We could search for this. There's, like I said, not a ton of exploits for SSH. SSH is usually a brute force, or I found credentials somewhere logging in with them for a shell. So, and then lastly, we could search this as well. But on this machine, this does not lead anywhere. So if you're curious about it and you want to research it, you are more than welcome to do it. So for the sake of time, that is really it for this lesson. This is just another box, another way of seeing methodology. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to try to build off the previous lesson where we learned about SMB, and now we got to see SMB again, and we got to exploit it again, but we also saw some extra versions and stuff to enumerate. So next time I have a box in mind already that I'm going to take for us, and we're going to build upon some of the things I talked about this time and just keep going in that methodology. So this has been episode 2. As always, if you like the video, please do hit the like, subscribe, comment, share. You know the whole statement, so I won't stress it too much. But I really do appreciate everybody watching. And as always, until next time, my name has been TCM, and I thank you for joining me.